All right, Baz, this one's for you. Um, Hopefully, you can make sense of this. If you have any questions or ideas, I'd rather you be more creative with it. But I just want to show you the main differences here. Um, Black dwarfs of establishment. To them, black dwarfs are very, very smooth on the surface, and they're mostly mathematical constructs. They don't want to concern themselves with physical reality because physical reality has too many variables, and with math you need to cut out all the variables, but the more variables you cut out, the more of reality you subtract from the model. So the more correct they are with the math, the less they have to do with reality. That's the main rule of thumb there. Black dwarfs, their atmospheres are mainly carbon, and that's also theoretical. They are the end stage of stellar evolution. To them, the white dwarf is an old star, and it cools and becomes a black dwarf, which is a dead star. They both have very small radiuses, and they both have huge masses. So that's another thing. There's no mass loss with this transition. So you have huge mass, small radius, huge mass, stops shining, still the same radius basically, which is very strange. They both the white dwarf slowly cools over billions of years, and they do not include any other stages of stellar evolution. That's a main problem here. It's a very big issue. And inside of establishment version of black dwarfs, they do not exist. They are theoretical. Okay. And to go over the differences here, I have the black dwarfs of stellar metamorphosis. They are rough and smooth. They have mountains, oceans, plateaus, and valleys. And I really sucked at that drawing there, as you can see. But basically, they're not mathematical. They're physical structures. So you can include all these variables in there and still be way more correct than the unrealistic, very smooth surface of the theoretical black dwarf. Their atmospheres have nitrogen, carbon dioxide, oxygen, argon, water vapor, etc. They are the end stage of stellar evolution, and that's the main thing that's correct with establishment. Is that, yeah, they are the end stage of stellar evolution. But what establishment does is they forget all the stages of stellar evolution. Here, stellar metamorphosis corrects that. You have a small radius and a large mass, and it expands very, very rapidly to dissipate the heat, and it shines, and it's very, very big and bright blue giant stages, and then it cools down from white stages to yellow to orange to auburn, to red, and then to auburn, and then it becomes a brown dwarf, and it continues cooling and contracting. I don't know if you can see those little dots there, but it just keeps on going, and eventually you get a black dwarf, which is like Earth or Mercury or Venus, which has a small radius and a small mass. So eventually what happens here is it expands, loses its mass to interstellar space, which is mainly comprised of, hydrogen, and eventually it leaves all the heavier material in the center, and material which is combined into molecules which, are too heavy to escape from the solar wind. They both, the black dwarf of stellar metamorphosis and establishment, both cool over billions of years. But what they mess up on is that they just skip all the steps of stellar evolution. They don't even include any of that. They just go straight from point A to point M or N or OP or whatever, not realizing that you have the whole alphabet to go through. So that's a big issue there. I guess you could say they go from straight A to Z, and then with this you go from A, B, C, D, E, F, G all the way through the alphabet to get to Z. So this is much more complete than the theoretical, mathematical, non-existent black dwarf of establishment. And which leads me to my last point. They actually exist. We can test them. They're testable. We're actually standing on one. It's right below your feet. But with the one of establishment, they're theoretical. They do not exist, which is a very big issue because the black dwarf is supposedly older than the universe. So if we were to see one, it means the Big Bang is incorrect. So essentially, I mean, it doesn't quite count, but really it kind of does. The Earth falsifies Big Bang itself. Just the Earth just simply existing falsifies Big Bang, which is really cool. I mean, if you were to radiometrically date Mercury, I'm sure you could find that it's actually many tens of billions of years old, but more on that later. Alright, hopefully that helps out. If you need any clarification on this, I can help you get more creative with it. Or, well, I actually suggest that you remain as simplified as possible so people aren't confused by anything. Alright, later.